Hello, my name is Alicia Goodman with the marketing team. Welcome to Embracing Flipped Learning Tour with John Bergmann and Aaron Sams, part of the ASCD Summer Bootcamp webinar series on classroom technology. Jonathan Bergmann believes that educators should ask one guiding question: what is best for my students in my classroom? To the best of his abilities, he has done this in his 25 years as a high school science teacher. He received the Presidential Award for Excellence for Math and Science Teaching in 2002 and was named a semifinalist for the Colorado Teacher of the Year in 2010. Bergmann is currently the lead technology facilitator for the Joseph Sears School in Kenilworth, Illinois. Aaron Sams has been an educator since 2000. He received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching in 2009 and co-chaired the committee to revise the Colorado Science Academic Standards. Sams holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Biochemistry and a Master of Arts degree in Education, both from Biola University, Colorado. He is currently a classroom teacher in Woodland Park, Colorado. Bergmann and Sams are authors of the ASCD book, Flip Your Classroom, Reach Every Student in Every Class, Every Day. ASCD is pleased to welcome John Bergmann and Aaron Sams.
We're John and Aaron. So, we've written a couple of books on the flipped classroom, Flip Your Classroom, and also the second book called Flipped Learning. So we're going to kind of dive into this and talk. So first of all, we're going to have you guys do a poll question. So if everybody would answer this poll question, and we'll learn a little bit about who you are. Looks to me like we've got 7% elementary teachers, 29% middle and high school teachers, 9% tech directors, specialists, 20% administrators, and 36% other. I'd be curious to know what the other is. That's a large percentage of other. So, yeah, you could put in the chat, if you'd like, in the chat space what you think the other is, if you're other. Be good to know who you are, what the others are. So, so let's go ahead and talk this thing through. Aaron, are you still there? Did I lose you? All right, so I think we may have lost Aaron.
Yes, I'm still here. I am having some connection problems, so if I drop off, you just keep going.
Okay, so I want to ask essentially, how many of you guys are parents out in the audience? And so I imagine many of you, if you were in a live presentation, you'd be raising your hand. So if you were a parent yourself, have you ever had this experience before? Have you ever sat at the kitchen table with your son or daughter and wondered about and helped them on their homework, and they've reached this point of just great frustration? And what have you done? Well, the flipped classroom really gets us to kind of an interesting question, and that is that what we're doing, I believe, is we're sending our kids home to do the hard stuff. For those of you who were in our presentation last week, some of this is review. I want to just kind of quickly do this and tell you a lot of very interesting stories. So what I mean by we're sending kids home to do the hard stuff, I think the way to think about this is that kids, like the picture we just saw, kids are going home and we're asking them to do some things from a Bloom's taxonomy perspective. So if you think about Bloom's taxonomy, if you would have walked into my classroom those first couple of years, or not couple, those first 19 years, I taught for 26 years, so the bio was a bit wrong earlier, but I taught for 26 years, and for those first 2 years, 19 years, pardon me, I spent most of my time doing remembering and understanding activities with my students. That's what I had them do in class. And what did I do? I sent them home to apply and analyze, evaluate, and create. Okay, I sent them home to do the hard stuff. So think of Bloom's taxonomy as if the stuff applied above is like the hard stuff. And so if you flip Bloom's taxonomy, what you do is you spend class time doing the hard stuff with them. Because, you know, who else can help your son or daughter besides you? Well, it's their teacher, right? So if you flip Bloom's taxonomy, you're flipping the class. And I think actually flipping the class is putting the class right side up. Because oftentimes kids go home and they do not have someone there to help. So my own personal children, when they come home, they can ask me for help. I mean, I regularly am helping my daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, on her advanced placement chemistry. Not too many people can help their kids on advanced placement chemistry. I happen to have taught advanced placement chemistry, so she gets the help. And most of her friends don't have that, do they? And so I believe when you flip the class, you're doing class right side up. And it really comes down to one key question. You know what the one key question is in the flipped class? It's this very simple question. What is the best use of your face-to-face class time? And this is the question that drove us. So a quick story. This is how the flipped classroom came to be. Is that while Aaron and I were starting the flipped classroom, we had our assistant superintendent, and she came to us. And she says, you know what, my daughter loves these videos that a professor at the local college is making. And then she made the statement that really changed our lives. She says, because she doesn't have to go to class anymore. And that's the day that Aaron and I looked at each other and said, well, what's the value of class time if somebody can just sit in their pajamas and get content? And we said, we need to rethink what class looks like. So we did that. What's the best use of your face-to-face class time? And that really is the driving question of this webinar today. Because there is no one answer to this question. There are lots of answers. And so what we're going to try and do is share the stories of the flipped classroom with you. And I'm going to walk you through. Aaron is having connection issues. So Aaron's going to dialogue with you guys, by the way, in the chat. And you're going to just get to hear all John all the time. So so what's the best use of your face-to-face class time? And there's lots of answers. So I want to walk you through the different subjects, if you will, of the flipped classroom. And what does it look like at different subjects and different levels? And I probably don't have the full list, but I probably have talked to people who teach virtually every subject. So let's start with math. First of all, let me say this to those of you who are mathematics teachers. And this could apply also if you're an elementary math teacher, a college professor, whatever it might be. I believe this is the biggest no-brainer in the history of the world, to flip your math class. Why do I say this is a big no-brainer? Because maybe in any other subject, or more in math than in any other subject, I would say there's probably kids with varying ability levels in your class. Now, even if you have, you know, a relatively homogeneous population, they're all taking calculus, let's say, at the local high school, or maybe they're all in your 4th grade math class. You've got kids who get it and kids, well, that don't, and everything in between. And one of the beauties of the flipped classroom is that it allows you to personalize and individualize and get the kids help on the hard stuff, if you will, right? And the kids who need help get more one-on-one, because as you know in the flipped classroom, or if you don't, I'll tell you, you get more interaction, more one-on-one with each kid. So huge. So let me tell you a story. A lesson from a 6th grade math class I visited. So I had the opportunity to visit this class in, it was in Texas. And this picture is not from that particular classroom, but it looked like 6th graders. So I walked into Ross's class, and Ross is a 6th grade math teacher somewhere in the Fort Worth area. And Ross had 30 kids in his class, well, I would say. Tiny little room, crammed in this little room. It was just like, oh, it felt claustrophobic. It was claustrophobic. And first of all, the kids had watched a video the night before on something to do with decimals, a 6th grade math topic, right? But not only had they watched the video, they also taken notes on the video. And not only had they taken notes on the video, but he had them answer 5 questions using an interactive form. So lots of tools that do this. He was using one tool. For example, one of the sponsors of this webinar, Adobe, has a tool, Adobe Connect 10, where you can get responses. So he asked 5 questions, and in those 5 questions, he knew some things. Number 1, he knew who had watched the video. Number 2, he knew how they'd done on the 5 questions. All right, so this is what happened. As the kids walked in, the first thing he did, he said, you, and you. Pointed to 4 kids and said, you know what to do. Those kids went to the back of the room and grabbed a device. I believe they were Chromebooks. They grabbed a device, they sat at their desk, put headphones on, and watched the video. What happened, of course, these kids had not watched the video. Then he had the second group of kids. The second group of kids he called up, and this was the vast majority of kids. I'm going to say 65 or 70% of the kids. He called them up, they showed the notes, and then he said, good job, you're doing great. Here's the assignment for the day. They grabbed an assignment sheet, went back to their desk, and started working on their assignment. The third group, he said, called them up. It's 6 or 7 kids, and these are kids who had scored, well, let me back up. The kids who had that first group, or the second group, the large majority of kids, the ones I just talked about, those kids had scored 4 or 5 out of 5 on the assessment. And the last group were kids who'd watched the video, but they did not get that. They'd gotten to 1, 2, or 3 or whatever, and he called them up and did sort of a reteaching. One thing to understand about flipped class is the kids are not going to necessarily understand everything. Many will, all right, but some won't. And so we had to do some reteaching with those kids. But they already had a background. Spent some time with them, and then set them free. And this process I've just described probably took too long to describe, but it took 10 minutes of the class time. And then he had 35 minutes to walk around and help kids. It's very, very powerful. Now, Aaron and I are science teachers, so we flipped our science classes. So does science work? Of course it does. Now, we taught chemistry, and chemistry can kind of be highly mathematical. And so parts of the sort of mathy part of chemistry is easy to flip. But we also flip, for example, an astronomy and earth science class. So I was in astronomy or science class, and those of you science teachers out there, it tends to be more descriptive, at least taught at the freshman and high school level, which is what I taught at, ninth graders. And with those kids, it's more descriptive. So I'm describing things like volcanoes and, how does a volcano erupt and what's magma and, or I'm teaching them about earthquakes and the causes of earthquakes and the different kinds of faults. I mean, you get it, right? So it's more descriptive. So it's not so mathematical. So again, in this class, what am I doing? I'm creating these videos of that content. What is magma and how does how does a volcano erupt? And there's different types of volcanoes. There's shield volcanoes. I mean, all the stuff of science. I'm teaching that stuff. And what am I doing in class? I'm doing more activities. Now, let me actually speak to math and science teachers specifically. We've actually found that the biggest majority of teachers flipping their classes are actually math and science teachers. What I found is sort of a continuum. So if you look at this particular diagram, let me talk this through. What oftentimes I have seen, particularly in math classes, is what teachers do is they flip their class, and then kids do worksheets and videos. They watch a video, they do a worksheet. They watch a video, they do a worksheet. They watch a video, they do a worksheet. And I'm going to argue that you don't want to just do that. That's the mistake I've seen the math teachers make. But what I've seen the science teachers do, actually, I'll just say me, I don't know if the science teachers, I did. What I did is I said, okay, I flipped my class. I want my kids to do higher order thinking skills. So what I did actually in my Earth-based astronomy and earth science class is I actually created a lab or a hands-on activity for my kids to do every day. I would say 4.5 days out of a week, if you will, we had some kind of an activity. And you know what? It was a mistake. Because I wanted my kids to do, hands-on, all that kind of stuff. And that's great, right? But the problem was it was too much. My kids needed more time to process. And so I needed to actually do less activities. So think of this as a continuum. Some people will make the mistake, it's worksheets and videos, and some say, all right, you have videos and activities in class all the time. I think there's a happy medium, all right? And my caution to math teachers, and again, this is for anybody, but I've particularly seen it in math, is to make sure you bring in activities. Have them use the math to do something with it, not just worksheets and videos. But then you don't want to go to the other extreme like I did. So I think you get the idea on that idea. Now, what about literature? How do you flip a literature class? You'd say, I don't understand how to flip a lit class. So if you're about to teach a piece of literature, let's say you're teaching Anne Frank, and are you going to just hand them the book and say, go? I don't think so. I think you're going to have some piece where you're going to have some direct instruction, maybe a couple of days, or you're going to talk about the history of what's happening during World War II with Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler, the oppression of the Jewish race. All this kind of stuff is such an important thing to have a conversation about. I think that's what you flip so that when you get into class, again, you still want kids to read the book, they're going to have a deeper conversation. So you're going to partially flip the class. I think another way to flip that we're seeing is to think about writing skills. So I walk into a class in here in Chicago area where I now live, and ninth grade, maybe 10th grade English class, and the teacher's lesson that day was on literary devices. So, similes and metaphors and personification and characterizations and connotations and all kinds of fun words. So the kids had watched a video on these literary devices, and it wasn't all of these. I think they had 5 literary devices that they learned. And as they walked in the room, the teacher said, everybody grab a whiteboard. These whiteboards were 3 feet by 5 feet. Well, it's a big monster whiteboards and a marker. And on the board, she had a prompt. They were groups of 3, by the way. And the prompt was, I don't remember what the prompt was. They had a prompt, and they were supposed to start writing. But she also wrote on the board, she wrote the word simile. And so she walked around the first group, she said, that is a great use of simile. I love it. Perfect. She walked to the next group and said, that's not a simile. You actually are using a metaphor. So what's the difference between a simile and a metaphor? So she's having a conversation with this group that, misunderstood simile and metaphor, and were misusing it. And then she had a great conversation. They were able to write. I mean, if you get the idea, what are they doing? They're applying what they've learned in class. Don't you see? So she's doing, if you think from a Bloom's taxonomic perspective, they're doing application level and above activities in class. But they had watched a very simple video on what is a simile, what is a metaphor, what is an alliteration, etc. And maybe one of the most powerful things that you can also do when you think about flipping writing is actually flipping the writing conference. Now, we've all been there, we've all graded papers, right? And we grade those papers with our red pen, so to speak. And we hand the paper to our, we hand the paper back to kiddos, and we do this. what a number of teachers have done is flip the writing conference. Now, the biggest hurdle to a writing conference is actually time, isn't it? It's hard to find the time to meet one-on-one with a kid over their writing sample. Because what do you do with the other 29 children in your class? That's the $55,000 question. Well, what if, and this is where I wish I had some kind of a video. I could show you videos of teachers doing this. What if you recorded you grading their paper? Recorded a video of you grading their paper. Does that make sense? There are software tools where you can grade that, and then instead of the kid getting the paper with all the red marks, the paper comes back and they get a video of you grading that. What a lot of teachers are doing is they're going to kind of read a paragraph and they push record, and then they record 20 seconds, maybe even 10, make some comments. So like in this paper we see on the screen, that is there's something wrong with that. I don't know what's wrong with that, but maybe you can make a quick verbal comment, and the kids get a video feedback. Now, when is the teacher doing this? At the same time, he or she would be grading the paper anyways. So you're actually just utilizing the time, and then the kid doesn't get the paper with the red marks back. The kid gets a video file, and then they improve. We've seen with some teachers who've done this huge results in like increasing in, it's like state writing tests. What about history teachers? Does it work with history? Again, I'll tell you another story. I met Rob in Buffalo, New York. Rob is a U.S. history teacher, and he told me this. He said history is a story, and in that story, he wants kids to tell the story of history. So he actually is having kids make videos. So he made, the first year, 2 years ago, he made 100% videos on U.S. history, and then in class the kids were making videos, documentaries. What he found is that there's something about a documentary, and if you think about Common Core or the new standards, maybe you're in Texas or Virginia where you have a little different standards, whatever, it's about research. You have to research to make a documentary, don't you? It's about writing. They have to write a script, don't they? So he had the kids making documentaries that first year. And then last year, what did he have his kids watch? His kids watched videos, good ones, that other kids had made the previous year. And so last year, he told me it was about 75%, 25% kids' videos. His videos were 75%, they were 25%. And then this year that just started, he's only going to actually, by the way, use kids' videos that are only 1 year old. So the best ones that were made last year are going to be then played this year. And he says he thinks he's going to end up about 65-35, his video. So still, most of it's his content, but see the power of letting kids create content. So that's a very interesting story. I mean, the key is, what do you want to do with the best use of your face-to-face class time, history teachers? Is probably you may want to have more Socratic dialogues, you may have more discussion. So instead of talking about, why did the Civil War happen if you're from the U.S., or why did a particular event occur, or instead of telling what happened, pardon me, you're going to have more of a deeper time to talk about the whys. So that's the history thing. We met an economics teacher, not professor, in Dallas area, Jason Kern, and he's flipping his economics class. The way he does this is he wants to talk about current events. So if you're talking about current events, are there economic implications? So he has the kids read the paper. I mean, all you got to do is pick up, the paper. And so maybe, for example, I don't know, I'm going to pick one that's kind of current news. Let's talk about, say, the Ebola virus. So that's what's going on. One of the things that's going on in this world is their economic principle. So the kids would watch a video the night before about some economic principle, and they would say, all right, let's talk about the Ebola virus. And as you talk about the Ebola virus, then the economic implications to that, to Western Africa, are pretty significant. I've seen that they're like canceling flights, and so people are losing money over this. So it'd be interesting, whatever topic. He actually, here's the totally out of control crazy thing he does. He lets the kids pick the current event that they want to talk about. They get to pick. But then the context is always what was the content of the video the night before. And then world languages. How do you help students who are in world languages? Well, the key thing I've seen is teaching somebody a different language is that one thing that's often I'm not saying this right. One thing that you often don't have time for is conversational in the target language. So in the flipped classroom, you get more time to converse. So you're going to make videos, for example, on topics like grammar and vocabulary and things like that, so that they can apply what they've learned by speaking the appropriate target language.
Hey class, here's an activity called rollerblading handball.
Okay, so
what you're going to take class, here's an activity.
That was a PE one. I actually had a video. I'm not sure it was playing, but I met some teachers who flipped their physical education course. And when they flip their physical education course, they have short videos on how to play some of the games, some of the rules of the game, so they can get right to physical activity. Because actually when I asked them the question, what's the best use of your face-to-face time, they told me we want our students to move their bodies more. We're spending far too much time telling them how to move their bodies. All right, so hopefully lots of stories. I met a guy in Michigan who's flipped his auto mechanics class. How do you flip an auto mechanics class? Actually quite easily. He's got videos on how to use actually the computer equipment that he has in his shop so they can diagnose the problem, so they can spend more time fixing cars. Actually, the flipped classroom is very, very good for these sort of very practical, hands-on types of courses. I don't have a slide on this, but I'm working with an organization called Corporation, Wella, W-E-L-L-A. It's a division of Procter & Gamble, and they make hair care products. In those hair care products, they are flipping the training of hair salon stylists. So a hair salon stylist needs to learn a particular technique on how to color someone's hair and using their particular product. So they are flipping the training of hair salon stylists. A very practical thing, something that you want to do. But they do have also issues because hair salon styling is also an art. And so how do you also give the salon stylist the freedom to create this, for lack of a better, masterpiece on someone's head? And so this is an interesting thing. So there's guidelines, and then there's also some freedom. So lots of things that are practical, or woodworking. Another very practical thing. I met a teacher in Sweden. His name is Leif, and his last name I'll Blomqvist. There's like all these consonants in his name, so I always get, I'm sure I'm butchering your name, Leif, if you're out there. But Leif is teaching woodworking to his students, and so he's got videos on how to make particular items, and the kids watch these so that they actually make them. So they don't have to sit around like this old picture and watch the guy do this. What they're going to do is they're going to watch the video on how to do this. Obviously, this might have some safety implications, so I mean he's making sure they're being safe, but he says the quality of the work has dramatically improved. And he also said, I'll use sort of an Americanism, I think, but basically the kids are no longer codependent on him. He said they used to say, hey, Mr. I'll say Leif, but it would be his last name, but I can't pronounce. Mr. Leif, Mr. Leif, Mr. Leif. They were always asking him for questions. It's like, hey, Mr. Leif. And he said, they're doing less of that, and the quality of the work is going on, and I'm more free to walk around and, comment on technique and walk them through stuff. He says, it's just been unbelievable. All right. I met a teacher, actually at the school at the Joseph Sears School, where actually I used to work, so the bio at the beginning was a little off. I left the school to do this full time. But I met a teacher, and he's teaching foods. And so he's got videos. It looks like the Food Network, folks. He's there making fruit smoothies, and the kids spend more time preparing stuff in class. So these very practical subjects, the arts, the PEs, the woodworking, the auto shop, is perfect for the flipped class, besides the academic subjects. So it really, really works. And what about those of you who work in special education? Does this work for them? I'll say this about special education. If you're, let's say you have kids in special, let me talk about sort of two situations. Situation number one, if you've got kids who are in a inclusion type of a program, so they're in the regular ed classrooms, but they're special ed. What is, I would say your best role is to encourage your teachers to flip their class. Because let's face this, we teachers, guys, I'm first to raise my hand. I talk too fast. I'm probably talking too fast right now. I'm going to slow down. So if you can encourage your teachers to just record their lessons, wouldn't that help your students so much? So they can pause and rewind their teachers. So one of your roles as a special education educator, if you're in some kind of an inclusion program, is to really encourage that. Another thing you can do in special ed is, if you maybe have more of a one class, you have all the special ed kids in one room, is what they need oftentimes is individualization. So what you may need to do is make different videos, if you will, for different kids, because they have different needs, and they could kind of move at their own pace. So this has become a very, very powerful thing for special ed students, our kids who need the most help, and that's been very encouraging for us. I met another class. I walked into a class again here in the Chicago area. It's a sports medicine class, and what this is actually is a picture of somebody measuring the angle of a leg. That's actually called a goniometer. So the lesson I walked in on was a teacher, and all the kids were doing this. They were measuring each other's legs and things, and as I chatted with the teacher, they'd watch the video on how to do this particular procedure. And what they would also do is they would like stretch the leg back and see how far it could bend. And this is kind of a physical therapy technique. You know, if you've ever been in physical therapy, some of you I'm sure have. But if you've been in physical therapy, they measure the angles and if it's, you know, if it's too much, or if you can't move it very far, then maybe there's some therapy you need or whatever. But the kids were practicing on each other, and as I chatted with the teacher, she said, you know, this used to take me 30 minutes to go over how to do this. There was a 10-minute video the kids watched, and we're getting into the lab right away. We're getting so much more done. And then those of you in leadership, so a lot of you I saw were administrators, etc. You don't have to just flip your class. Guess what? You could flip a faculty meeting. So I helped contribute to an article for Education Leadership on flipping faculty meetings. I encourage you to think about that. Is again, that same question, what's the best use of your face-to-face class time? You only have so many minutes a day, maybe not a day, you only have so many minutes, let's say, with your faculty. Flip your faculty meetings. I was able to do some of this. I was, you know, technology director for a school district, and I flipped the professional development of my staff, because I was essentially one of the professional development leaders as my key role. Also, when I led meetings, we flipped those meetings. So I encourage you to not just go into a meeting and have information dissemination, but have a rich conversation about deep pedagogies. So there's lots of ways to flip leadership. All right, and those elementary teachers out there, I don't want to forget you, because I believe that's my next, does that say flopping or flipping? Yeah, flipping elementary school. You can flip an elementary classroom too, so the younger kids can benefit from the flipped classroom. Again, it's a very simple idea, short videos. And actually, let me say something about how long the video should be. My general rule of thumb, or our general rule of thumb, Aaron's and I, is 1 to 1.5 minutes per grade level. So if you teach 4th grade, that's a 4 to 6 minute video. If you teach 10th grade, that's a 10 to 15 minute video. So really, the idea is to keep them pretty short. It doesn't quite work at the kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade level. You may have 3 or 4 minute videos, but the idea is to keep them short. And let me tell you a story of a teacher I met in the Seattle area, Randy Brown. That's Randy right there. And that's actually his class. And what Randy does is Randy says, you know, I've always wanted to have a second adult in my room, but my school district, well, basically can't afford it. You know, and so how do I do this? So he told me the story. He was on a plane reading a copy of our book, and he just said, this solves my problem. Oh my gosh, I've got to do this. So he's a 3rd grade teacher. He went back to his room and he started making some videos. And so what he's done is he's got 26 kids in his class, or he did last year. I don't know how he's got this year. But with his 26 kids, 13 of them are watching videos. You can see them watching some videos on the devices. They've got headphones on. They're actually watching them all together. Right? Sometimes we call this the in-flip, as you can see on the screen. So the kids are actually not going to watch the videos at home. One of the big questions, you know, what are they going to do the homework? Well, in his case, he says, well, they're just going to do it in class. So he's teaching them directly through video, but only 13 of them are doing that. Meanwhile, upper picture there, he's working individually with the other 13 kids. And the kids are getting much, much more one-on-one, individualized attention. Now, he's got some results that are astounding, too. So before he flipped his class, he shared with me that on his reading and math tests, those are the 2 tests that his kids take, his kids over the course of a year would gain 1.1 grade levels. You know, in 1 year, you want kids to get 1 year of growth. Well, he was getting 1.1, which is pretty good, right? He says now his kids are on average getting 1.7 and 1.8. I forget which one was reading and which one was math. But that's monster. And I asked him, I said, Randy, what do you attribute that to? And he said, well, more one-on-one time with kids. I get so much more. I was looking to find a second adult, and the flipped classroom gave me the second adult, and that second adult was me. So you can flip without homework. This doesn't just apply, by the way, to elementary teachers. You could do this in other classes. I actually have seen this very effective with, say, alternative schools. So alternative high schools where kids oftentimes don't do homework and they're coming from oftentimes troubled backgrounds, and schools, they don't do school very well. And the in-flip has been very powerful for that group of students as well. That leads us to flipped class to flipped learning. Aaron, I wonder if this is a good time to take some questions. So I don't know if you can still hear me, but what do you think? Can you pipe in for a second? And
hey, John, my audio coming through?
Yes.
I will try, John. I've been answering lots and lots of questions in the question module, trying to get to as many as we possibly can. A few people are asking if you could explain the idea of the in-flip a little more. Explain like how how flipping works if you're not sending anything home. You have to give homework to call a flipped classroom, that kind of deal. And also some more ideas about how it works in the elementary level, upper elementary level, and then address the idea that flipping is all about videos, and just, you know, if you're just recording bad lectures, you just have recorded bad lectures. So there's some questions for you.
All right, so let me then chat about them. So the in flips, let's go back. I think we have a slide here. We can go. So in the in flip, I mean, the kids are going to watch the videos in class. I mean, that's the idea, and they get the content in class, and then you're going to get more one-on-one time with kids. You don't have to actually send the videos home. I'm not sure how else to explain that, but in his case, in Randy's case, the kids are literally watching them actually on a screen. If you look in the bottom picture there, there's a big screen that you can't see. And the kid who's writing on the board there is one of the one-on-one kids who's working with Randy doing some kind of an activity. And so so he's just got essentially one device in the room. It's a 40-inch TV that the kids are looking at. I mean, there's some other devices, but that's not being used for the video projection. So, for elementary teachers, I think oftentimes this looks more like centers. They've got centers that they're going to go to one center. I mean, you could have just a center. He's just kind of basically got two centers, you know, the one big one and then the small one. I mean, it could look a lot different. Maybe you just want to have them rotate with different centers. Maybe you've got, you know, 3 or 4 devices in your room, you know, 3 iPads or, you know, 3 Chromebooks or, I don't know, whatever device you've got, and you want kids to watch and interact with the videos. So let's start with the videos too. That second question, it might be third, but I'll go in different order. Is the flipped class all about the videos? And the answer is no. It's actually a term that we actually like to use more, is actually learning objects. And you know, when we first started, we flipped our class with just videos, but then we began to realize that videos aren't the best way to teach everything. And so we think the idea of the flipped classroom is to really maximize that face-to-face time. To answer that question, what's the best use of your face-to-face time? And I mean, we have a definition of flipped learning. And what we're saying is it's when you move the large or the whole group instruction from the whole group to the individual. So they're not watching it in the whole group, they're not getting content as a whole group, they're getting it individually on these devices. And they could get it different ways. They could also just read a book. Okay, you know, and is it, you know, some people asked, is it the flipped classroom if they read a book and they come to class and we discuss it? I don't know. You know, I don't know sure it matters what we call something. If that's good teaching, then it's good teaching. But I will say this, I do believe video is a very powerful medium, and I think we're not using it as much as we could in the classroom. And let's face it, agree or disagree, I mean, like it or not, I should say, this is the YouTube generation. That's it. And then at the upper elementary grades, most people in the upper elementary are actually flipping in a more traditional way. The kids are going home watching, you know, third, actually 4th and 5th grades in particular. I've seen them, the kids will watch a short video. And most teachers start in the elementary actually in math, and they flip their math instruction, and the kids go home, they watch a short video on you know, some kind of a topic, and then they come to class and then they get a lot of help. That's, you know, and they still do. And then make sure that, again, like I said earlier, you're also bringing in some projects. Don't just worksheets and videos, but there's also other activities the kids are interacting with. So I think that answers those 3 questions that you posed, Aaron. And let me take a couple of steps here, and then I want to talk about going from the flipped class to flipped learning. So when Aaron and I described, we've got 2 books, right? The first one is the Flip Your Classroom. The second one is Flipped Learning. Flip Your Classroom is really about how to flip your class. I mean, it may seem like a semantic thing, but it isn't. In the flipped classroom, in the traditional flipped classroom, what we like to call the Flipped Class 101, the students watch a video on Tuesday night, and all the students watch the same video on Tuesday night. And on Wednesday, they come to class, and they do some activity in class. But what we've discovered is that's a great place to start, Flipped Class 101, because we've got this graphic, I think, that explains it. You can move from Flipped Class 101, and then you move to other deeper learning strategies. So for Aaron and I, what we did is that first year we did Flipped Class 101, and then we came up with a crazy idea. What if we expected the kids to actually master the content? So we moved to Flipped Mastery. So we began to expect our kids to actually learn the content. I know that's a novel idea. And we borrowed heavily from the work of Benjamin Bloom, in fact, who was a big proponent of mastery learning. He wrote a kind of a big article in 1972 or 1974, somewhere in the early 70s, called Learning for Mastery. And where he basically said something to the effect, I'll crazily summarize it, he says he believed that 95% of kids can learn anything, given enough time and support. And they backed it up with some evidence. So the flip mastery model is basically using the mastery model of Benjamin Bloom and applying the techniques of the digital generation. And we talk about that, if you will, in the second half of our first book. But then what we began to discover that there are more than one way to flip your class, not just in terms of the stories of by subjects, but we found some teachers who began to who didn't go from Flip Class 101 to Flip Mastery, but they went Flip Class 101 to Flipped and Peer Instruction. Or they went to project-based, or Explore, Flip, Apply, which is a great inquiry technique developed by Dr. Ramsey Musalam in San Francisco, a number doing Genius Hour. And if you kind of look at this diagram, I wish I could mark it up, but flipped learning is anything to the right of Flip Class 101. And so our second book really kind of goes through moving to the deeper strategies. So if you were to think of this like Harry Potter, if you will, bad example, maybe, I don't know, but it's like book 1 is how you get started, book 2 is taking it to the next step. And you know, in Flip Mastery, if you want to kind of get a schematic, you start with the direct instruction. That's kind of small. That's because that's on the videos. Practice, application, assessment. And if they take some kind of assessment and they fail it, then they have to do it over again. And again, there's not a lot of time to go through. I admit there might be a million questions on how Flip Mastery works, but we're going to skip it time-wise. Let me talk about another model, which is peer instruction. So Flip Peer Instruction are going to go from Flip Class to Flip Peer Instruction. It's kind of, I don't know, 2 o'clock there, right? And so in peer instruction, what you do is it maximizes class time. You're going to give kids sort of an application level question to work on with each other in class. So for example, I don't know, I'm just going to give you the synopsis. Here, I was going to do an example. It's kind of hard to do this. And that's kind of a question you'd ask. But here are the steps to peer instruction. And again, there's a book called Peer Instruction. This was developed by Dr. Eric Mazur, who's a professor at Harvard, physics professor, and he's got a book called Peer Instruction. I encourage you to pick up a copy. But basically, you assign a reading, a video, or an activity. They do that before class. And then they come in and you solicit feedback from students individually. So you basically figure out, what do you think the answer to this question is? So like, for example, the question that I had on the screen, this would be one of these questions. Usually it's a multiple choice. And oftentimes what kids do is they get it wrong. And then he analyzes the feedback. And then he has them get into groups, 2 or 3 or 4 kids, and say, now discuss this. And the key to the groups is that the groups have a varying answers. So it's not everybody picked A. Some kid picked A and some B and some C or whatever. And they're going to sit and argue about it. And then they do that for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or something like that. Then you re-poll the students. And the power of this is almost every time the kids come back with the right answer. And then, of course, you do have to discuss as a large group the misconceptions. Now, why did you make this mistake? Very powerful technique that I encourage you to look at. So the key really is to use, from a Bloom's taxonomic perspective, is application and above-level questions when you do peer instruction. Again, what we're trying to say is we should do the hard stuff with the expert there, the teacher, that's you or that's me, in the class with them, the application and above-level questions. So does the Flip class work? So just a couple things. I give you some resources here. If you go to fliplearning.org/research, our nonprofit organization, Aaron and I started, Flipped Learning Network, has conducted some research. And we haven't really conducted research. We've collected some research, and you can read more there. There's also some critics who feel that the flipped classroom is just going to replace teachers, and we're going to have less and less teachers because of the flipped classroom. And actually, that's actually completely the opposite. The reality is it actually makes teachers matter more. So I'd encourage you just to go to this quick short link, and you can read our thoughts on why actually in the flipped classroom teachers matter more. I think that's important. If you're at all interested in learning more about what Aaron and I are doing, we've created a short inquiry form for you guys. So if you go to bit.ly/flip inquiry, and that is case specific, so everything does have to be lowercase. We'd love to get your feedback. If you'd like to basically receive updates from Aaron and I, if you go to that form and just fill out, it's like just name and email information, we'd love to hear from you, and maybe we can work with you. We're doing a lot of work around the world, working with schools, working with corporations, working with departments of education, helping them flip, and so we'd love to come and work our organization to work with you and help you out. And there's also a way that you guys can help us out. Aaron and I, I'll put that slide back up. I also want to share with you one other one. Many of you may have heard of the South by Southwest conference that happens every year in March. It's kind of a big conference, and they've actually got, they have what they call a panel picker, where different people can, basically people vote whether or not somebody comes and speaks at this conference. So So the panel picking closes this Friday, and we would love you to vote for our session. If you could be replaced by a YouTube video, you should be. So, but let me actually explain that statement so I don't offend anybody. We believe that the role of a teacher needs to change. If a teacher, and I was one of these, is just about disseminating content, then you're not adding any value because content is out there, let's just say, on the internet for anybody to get. And we think we need to rethink what schools look like. So our session is called, if you can be replaced by a YouTube video, you should be. So if you want to go to our site and vote, I do believe you have to register, but they don't spam you or anything. But I encourage you to possibly think about voting for our session. We would really appreciate that. And if you want to work with us, again, that's bit.ly/flip-inquiry. And if you want to vote for our cool session, flip S by SW, South by Southwest. That is all capitalized, the S by SW. So let me pause. I bet there's some time for some questions. We've got quite a few minutes, Aaron. I have not looked at the chat at all. I know you're monitoring it. Why don't you help us out?
Yeah. So, John, can you hear me right now? I don't know what my connection is. Oh, wow. Maybe I should have come on earlier. Yeah, I've been answering questions like crazy. A couple people were asking about, can you flip without using video? And then what are some other tools you can do to kind of get some of that in-class time back? And then I think that's all I can think of right now that I had an answer. Oh, and then some possible tools that you can use for content creation. I had given a few in the chat, but can you talk about tools and then other things that you can do to?
I got it. Yeah. I wrote it down. So the tools, there are lots of tools for content creation. I mean, the sponsor of this webinar is Adobe. They have a great product called Adobe Presenter 10. And what it does is that kids, you create the video and using their tool, and then you can also build an assessment into the video. So it's got some pretty cool tools in the sense that, like in the middle of a video, you can have the video pause, and then a question will pop up. And when that question pops up, then ultimately what you will know as a teacher is the analytics. You'll know who watched the video, how long they watched the video, and how they responded to the questions. So that's one tool. There's other ones. TechSmith makes some good products that we're really fond of. techsmith.com. And there's some free tools. Screencast-O-Matic is another one that we've seen a lot of people using. Quite a few iPad apps if you've got the iPad. One called Explain Everything, which also, by the way, has an Android version. Explain Everything is a great iPad app. Another one we're fond of is the Doceri app, D-O-C-E-R-I. I might be mispronouncing that. So lots of tools. The big question about what's the best tool, people often ask us, and the answer is the one you will use. So my encouragement is that you play around with the different tools. Almost all of them will have a free 30-day trial. Try a couple until you find the one that just works best for you. Can you flip without videos? Yeah, maybe not completely, but I would say that use learning objects. So an example that we did is that as science teachers, there's a bunch of online interactive simulations in science topics. The ones we like, personally, if you're a science teacher, are the one made by PhET, and PhET is spelled P-H-E-T. Maybe Aaron can put the link in the chat window. But the PhET interactives are really good at letting kids explore. It's more of an inquiry technique. So you give the kids this interactive. So envision, if you will, a flask, a science flask, and in the flask are a bunch of little marbles, and the marbles represents molecules, and as you heat them up, they go faster, and then the pressure goes up. But the kids get to sort of play around with this, and as they play around with this, they learn. And so those are the kinds of things that kids can interact with, so that in class, maybe you're going to discuss, well, what is it about pressure when the temperature goes up that the pressure goes up? I mean, these are the kinds of things that you can do. So, yeah, I guess that's the answer to the questions that you asked me. So the key is, oops, I just ended it. The key is, as we think about this, is I really want to challenge you guys with the question, what is the best use of your face-to-face class time? I've given you lots of stories about teachers, but you're going to have a different answer. Yes, Aaron.
John, a couple other questions. Suggestions on best flipped classroom workshops coming in the next few months. What do we have in on our schedule and area that you know of?
Yeah, so sort of the big one in the United States is that we are doing FlipCon Texas. That's coming up January 9th and 10th in the Dallas area. If you go to flippedclass.com, it's front and center on the website. And we'd love you to come visit. That's a really cool one because what we're going to do, it's a Friday, Saturday, is that Friday morning we're going to have you go to actual classrooms that have flipped. And if you're an elementary teacher, you'll go to an elementary school. If you're a science teacher, you'll be in a science room. If you're a world language teacher, you'll be at a world language class. You're going to go visit with real teachers in the morning who flip their classes. And then in the afternoon, a group of students will present their perspective. And then also during that time, Aaron and I will be presenting kind of a big keynote address. And then all Saturday, we're going to have like one session on tools that you can use, one session on different pedagogies. It's going to be an exciting conference. So that's January 9th and 10th. Also in January, we've got an exciting event. If you are international, we're having FlipCon, we call it FlipCon or Flip Class Conference, FlipCon Dubai. So we'll be speaking in Dubai as well. And, just, go to that, Flip inquiry thing that I had up earlier, and we'll make sure we send you an email about upcoming events that we have coming up for conferences. A lot of other people are doing events. I can't find that. What I'm looking for. A lot of people are doing other events, and so we're not the only ones who do events on the Flip class, but we've probably been doing it the longest. And so go to the website and make sure that you leave information, or just here on this page here, and we'll make sure you get the right information.
John, what's the best place to put your videos once you have them created? And so the question about Adobe Presenter, is it similar to Nearpod?
No. Okay, so hold on. Nearpod, and what was the first question? I didn't have my pen.
What's the best?
Oh, place to put videos. Yeah, I got it. So the best place to put the videos is there's no right answer. It depends on the IT infrastructure of your school. I'll say this, I've become a fan of YouTube. The reason I like YouTube, if it's not blocked, this is always the caveat in the United States schools, if it's not blocked, is that every kid's device has to play with YouTube, because nobody's going to make a device that doesn't play YouTube videos. And YouTube has really done a lot of great stuff. And so I'm a fan of that, but sometimes it doesn't work. Possibly if you've got a learning management system already in your school system, like, say, Canvas or Moodle or Schoology or My Big Campus or Blackboard, then you may want to just post it there. So, or Edmodo or Haiku Learning, there are so many of these, or like in Europe, InfoMentor, I don't know, there are 100 of these, and most of them are very good. And you may want to post them directly there. And is Adobe Presenter like Nearpod? No. No, it's really a video creation tool, and then you're going to collect the analytics. Nearpod is more like a synchronous. I played around with Nearpod a little bit, and so I'm not an expert on Nearpod. But as I recall, it makes for synchronous activities where the kids are watching things all at the same time in class, and so it's a little bit different. And it's a good tool. I remember liking it for what it is, but for the Flip class, it's not exactly the same type thing as Adobe Presenter. You got some more cues for me?
Looking for them here. A lot of people have questions that did show up in our previous webinar, so the ASCD folks can help you out figuring out how to access that, but I believe it is on the ASCD website.
Yes, it is. I'll include a link on a slide here coming up, but for those of you who want it right now, it's ascd.org/webinar archives, and John and Aaron's webinar is very close to the top of the list on that page.
Great. So really, John, the only things that are coming in are still some more about resources. Some people didn't quite hear the list that you rattled off really, really quickly. If you could maybe slowly go through a few of the content creation tools that we like. Okay.
Yeah, content creation tools we like. Adobe Presenter we talked about. There's a number of products made by a company called TechSmith, T-E-C-H, Smith.com. They have one called, if you're really looking for a really good tool for a whole school, they have one called TechSmith Relay. They've also one called Camtasia and one called Snagit. So, but they're all at one website, techsmith.com. For iPad apps, I like Explain Everything. It's also an Android app, so that's cross-platform. Actually, another app I didn't mention that I'm a fan of, particularly if you've got some kind of physical motion in your class. Think of woodworking classes, art classes, PE classes. One called Coach's Eye. It's an iPad app. or iPhone app too, for that matter. Then another one I like is called Doceri, and that is just iPad. Or, yeah, it's just iPad. That doesn't even work on iPhones. Doceri. And a free web tool does not work on an iPad or whatever, but a web tool works on a Mac or a PC is called Screencast-O-Matic. So I'm a fan of that one as well. Again, which tool you use doesn't matter. You just have to pick the one that works for you. So try them all out, you know, and say, oh, this is the one I really want to use. So.
John, we've had a question about the dates of the Dubai conference. Can
Go to flippedclass.com and you can register there. It's January 20-something. I don't have flippedclass.com up in front of me. I want to say 21st, but I don't have it at the top of my head, but I know it's front and center on the first page of flippedclass.com. So you can, you know, there's the events tab. It's hard to miss. So. And actually, if you're a leader, by the way, there's actually two parts. I will be in Dubai in November working with a group of leadership. So it's like school-based administrators for a one-day conference. And then the Dubai conference, the sort of the big conference, is in January of 2015 for 3 days.
John, there was just a question about any place we'll be in Asia. John's actually leaving for Korea. Is it next week?
I leave for Korea next Friday, so I'll be in Korea for a week. Yeah.
And I will be in Thailand in October, and I will be in Taiwan in November. John, do we have anything else in Asia on the calendar at this point?
I believe there's quite a few inquiries that are happening right now, so I do believe that we're going to have quite a few activities coming up. There's a number of people who want actually for us to do like FlipCon in parts of Asia, so we are brokering those deals, I guess, as we speak. So again, where will you find it? Flippedclass.com, and you know, you can sign up to receive updates, and if one of those things happens, obviously we will email everybody and say, hey, if you're in Asia, please come to this event.
Well, John, that's it for the questions, and that's it in the chat. So I think we should probably wrap it up and hand it back to our friends at ASCD.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Aaron, for fielding all those questions in the questions pane, and John for leading the verbal presentation. John Bergmann and Aaron Sam's ASCD book, Flip Your Classroom, Reach Every Student in Every Class Every Day, is available at in the ASCD store. Visit shop.ascd.org and search for the title to purchase.